Ecosystems around the world are being degraded or lost due to climate change and land transformation to feed and house increasing populations. Africa is being impacted particularly hard. 65% of its productive land is estimated to be degraded, making people more vulnerable to climate disasters like droughts and floods, and intensifying food insecurity. But people are confronting these challenges by restoring the degraded ecosystems that are impacting their livelihoods. Building on this momentum, the UN has declared 2021 to 2030 the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration to raise awareness and ambition worldwide. In Africa alone, these countries have pledged to restore 100 million hectares through the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative. But with the scale of the problem and the change needed to fix it, we have to get this right.
The successful projects are the ones that consider the needs of local community.
Across the board, people implementing ecosystem restoration will tell you this is what sets successful projects apart.
Local communities have learned to live and adapt with the changing environment. So I know that many of us, we tend to think that if it's not written somewhere, you won't trust what you hear. But it's also good to recognize that the local knowledge and the traditional indigenous knowledge, we've seen that it helps because these are the people at the end of the day that are going to stay in those places being managed or being restored. So not working with them or not tapping into their knowledge and capabilities is a waste of resources.
But engaging communities properly is easier said than done. Many restoration projects in Africa have failed in this regard, leading to some high-profile cases of injustices.
We also hear about those top-down approach. Someone is interested in doing something in an area, they just go on and they get their work done. And that's what leads to disasters, expansion of plantations that are unplanned or like not asked for by local community. You read that on the news or across the globe.
So ecosystem restoration cannot just be about bringing back natural environments. It's also about empowering communities.
We encourage the inclusion of income-generating activities so that people are able to realize short-term and long-term socio-economic benefits from the restoration initiatives. And this helps to build resilience for the livelihoods.
These marginalized communities are the ones who are most vulnerable when it comes to the effects of climate change. So if we involve them in the restoration program, they are more likely to have a sustainable livelihood, right to adequate food, and they'll be more resilient to climate change.
And then within the community, we also need to consider who gets to be involved.
Yes, I feel like that the marginalized groups that have been left behind, you have the people with disabilities, the young people, and the marginalized women. Yeah, definitely they might not be part of the conversation. Working with group is easier than working with individuals. So if you form a group for those marginalized people, you already have their voice on board. And those groups, you empower them.
In Kenya, community groups help to dismantle the old top-down land management system and replace it with a new Forest Act, which allows communities to have a say in the management of their nearby forests.
Yeah, the wood law, all that a cabinet or a minister had to do was to write a notice that they want to change the boundaries of a certain forest. And so in the year 1998 and 2001, the then Minister for Natural Resources wrote many intentions of changing forests to settlements and private sector, and over 100,000 hectares of forest was lost within that time. Kenya has got a very low tree cover. Previously, it was less than 3%. Right now, because of the campaigns that have been done, we have a tree cover of about 12%, but it is still very, very low. That is where we get most of our rivers that supply water in the entire country, including in the dry areas. So you cannot allow any government to encroach into these few forests.
But even without broad policy change, communities in Africa have organized grassroots restoration without relying on support from external funders.
The local leaders have much influence in the community. So when you convince the local leaders, it's much easier to work also with the community members. So we're able to help them see the connection between, for example, the deforestation and climate change. This is a very important part because Once you get them understand the importance of the project, then they are very much willing to participate and even to contribute some local resources. When they contribute something, it really builds some great sense of ownership. When you build that kind of sense of ownership, it also increases their commitment to the project.
Ultimately, this creates restoration projects that are led by these communities themselves, which is crucial to achieving lasting benefits for them and the ecosystems that we all depend on. Having communities own and lead restoration projects that impact them is the only way we can make the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration a success.